Tobacco companies don't care about the health of Brazilians or anybody else. They don't care about the medical costs that they impose on the people in the government. They care about maximizing their profits and sales.
Hi, everyone out there. We are here because we may be in the most dangerous moment to public health in Brazil since the COVID pandemic. We are very worried as health professionals. We make a vow to graduate, so we keep serious about it. And we bring Dr. Stanton Glantz. He's been a professor to University of California, San Francisco, which is a huge reference for us in the advocacy pro public health and protection of people from the tobacco industry. I'm here for ABEAD, Associação Brasileira de Estudos em Álcool e Drogas. I'm the vice president till 2025. So it's very important to make things concrete and with facts. I'm so thankful for your availability. You've been helping us a lot, and your huge researchers have plenty of important papers published. Study that in a serious way, because one thing is to get whatever method, research method, and get to a conclusion that has nothing to do with the method. And the other one is to think about the research design and keep the conclusion aligned with the method. That's what we are trying to talk about during the last public audience in the Senate. And Senator Soraya Thronicke is a senator that has been very favor of e-cigarettes regulation. And she starts the audience saying that Anvisa, our FDA, it's like FDA, but Anvisa has also a link to SUS, or Unified System Health. And she says Anvisa owes to Brazil a regulation. And that's so untrue. Maybe she's not very well oriented by her team. And she miscomprehend regulation and the tactics from the industry. And it's natural because she doesn't have any public health diploma, graduation, or degree. She's a lawyer as a profession and committed to impartiality as a member of the government. So we are very baffled because we can't speak in the press like she does. She's speaking every other day in journals and saying the same things that the industry wants everyone to think, but it's grounded on sand and not on rock. I already made a brief summary of the last audience, and do you want to talk about it a little?
Yes, well, the first, there's a couple of things that you need to kind of, where she's just simply either doesn't understand or is misrepresenting the situation. First of all, they've argued that there's a need to regulate e-cigarettes in Brazil. The fact is, e-cigarettes are regulated in Brazil, and Visa regulates them, and they have prohibited the import and sale of e-cigarettes in Brazil. That's a regulation. And if you look around the world, and Visa is viewed as one of the most effective leading public health agencies in the world. And so to say that e-cigarettes aren't regulated is just incorrect. They are regulated, they're just simply not permitted. Now, what's been the effect of the current regulation? the industry's been making a big deal out of the fact that about 2 million by their estimates, Brazilians have used e-cigarettes. Okay, well, that sounds like a lot, but there's over 200 million Brazilians, and so it's less than 1% of the population. And if you compare the level of e-cigarette use in Brazil, especially among kids, with other countries that theoretically regulate e-cigarettes, like the United States or Britain or New Zealand, the e-cigarette use rates, particularly among kids, are 10 to 20 times higher. So while the Anvisa regulation hasn't been perfect, it hasn't stopped all e-cigarette use in Brazil, it's kept it well below what you see in countries where they're legal. And, I've also looked at a couple of other countries. There's about 40 countries that follow the Brazilian model and where e-cigarettes are illegal. I've looked at Thailand and Turkey, which have similar regulations, and you see the same thing there that you see in Brazil. There is a little bit of use that leaks through, but it's way below what you see in other countries. Even in England, which is a hotbed of pro e-cigarette policy, even among many health organizations, the youth use is completely out of control. And finally, even in England, they've been forced to admit it, and they're trying to figure out what to do about it. The second thing is that creating a regulated market where you allow the sale of these products has not been done successfully anywhere in the world. If you look at the United States or England, where there are e-cigarettes, or New Zealand or Canada, where e-cigarettes have been encouraged or at least tolerated by the government and theoretically regulated, the great bulk of the market is still illegal products. And youth use has exploded. If you look at what's happened in those countries, if you just look at total youth nicotine addiction, which had been falling over the last 10 or 20 years, since the advent of e-cigarettes, that progress has been reversed. And while sole cigarette smoking has continued to drop, it's dropping slower than it did before the advent of e-cigarettes. But if you add the e-cigarette and cigarette use to get a total measure of youth nicotine addiction, it's way up. The other thing that you need to think about is, why are the tobacco companies and their political allies, including the senator, pushing to legalize the market? Tobacco companies are not public health agencies. Tobacco companies don't care about the health of Brazilians or anybody else. They don't care about the medical costs that they impose on the people and the government. They care about maximizing their profits and sales. And so the reason they're pushing to bring e-cigarettes into the Brazilian market, to get the regulations changed so they can sell them, is so they can increase the use of e-cigarettes, the sale of e-cigarettes, the profits from e-cigarettes. And that is not a good thing for anybody in Brazil. Finally, the claim that it's necessary to deal with smuggling is a standard industry argument that they've used for decades all over the world. The industry has been repeatedly shown to be involved in the illicit market, the smuggling that goes on. The major tobacco companies are complicit in it, and there's internal industry documents which have become public as a result of lawsuits against the industry. They even have a name for it. It's called duty not paid tobacco products. And the standard strategy that the industry's been using for decades is to promote the illicit market and then go to the authorities and say, we have this smuggling problem, which the companies created, and you need to legalize these products and allow their import in order to deal with the smuggling. So this whole argument over smuggling is completely hypocritical and fallacious. The big tobacco companies could essentially end all smuggling if they wanted to by simply stopping putting product into these illicit channels. And there's a WHO protocol tied into the Framework Convention on Tobacco Control on illicit trade, which is now in force. And the tobacco companies have done everything they can to prevent the countries from signing on to that protocol and the effective implementation of the protocol. So I think the bottom line for Brazil is you have a good regulatory system now. Anvisa is doing a very good job. It's protecting the people of Brazil. It's protecting the kids of Brazil. It's helping to keep healthcare costs low. And the only winner to change the current regulatory environment in Brazil would be the tobacco companies. The final argument which was made at that hearing is that, well, e-cigarettes are a way for smokers to quit smoking. And the e-cigarette companies and advocates like quoting a review done by an organization called the Cochrane Collaborative, which looked at a small number, like depending which one you look at, it's somewhere between 5 and 13 studies, which are what are called randomized controlled trials. It's the standard way you assess a medicine. And
they lied during their speech. They said 400 studies and inflated everything.
Yeah, well, what the Cochrane Collaborative did, they did review a lot of studies, because when you do these systematic reviews, you cast a very broad net and you try to find everything that's out there, but then they narrow it down to the relevant ones. And while they considered a huge number of studies, the actual analysis is based on around 10. They've done several of these reviews and the numbers vary a bit. But what they show is that if you give people e-cigarettes in a clinical environment as a smoking cessation medication, often combined with counseling to help people quit smoking, they do help people quit smoking. It's not a huge effect, but it is detectable. Well, I think, the thing you need to keep in mind when assessing the Cochrane Collaborative is that was assessing e-cigarettes as a medicine. And no e-cigarette company, as far as I know, has gone to the medical drug authorities in any country and asked that e-cigarette be approved as a smoking cessation medication. Now, I think there's no reason they shouldn't do that or couldn't do that, and that, they could go to Anvisa and to the medicine side of Anvisa and say, we want this approved as a medicine. And I think the fact that they haven't done it shows that they know it probably would fail. There's a much larger body of scientific evidence, around probably 75 to 100 studies, looking at the association between using e-cigarettes and stopping smoking in the real world. Not when you have a doctor giving them to you along as part of a formal smoking cessation program, but if you just go out and buy them and use them however you want. And what most of those studies show is that e-cigarettes keep people smoking. And in fact, the best of these population studies, where they followed people forward in time for 3 years, there's 2 of them, found that smokers who used these cigarettes were way less likely to stop smoking than smokers who didn't. And so what e-cigarettes actually do in terms of helping people quit smoking is they actually keep them smoking. which is another reason that the big tobacco companies want to get them into the Brazilian market and expand the Brazilian market, is because it protects the cigarette market, which is very, very profitable for them. The other thing which I heard at that hearing was this ridiculous claim that e-cigarettes are 95% safer than cigarettes. Now, that claim was first made about 7 or 8 years ago. If you go read the actual scientific paper that includes that claim, two things jump out at you. The first is that several of the people working on it had conflicts of interest. They had ties of one sort or another to the tobacco or e-cigarette companies. But the other more important thing is if you look and say, well, what's the actual evidence that they cite that e-cigarettes are 95% safer? And the short answer is there isn't any. This group of people just got together in a room and they scratched their head and they scratched their behind and they said, we think they're 95% safer. And they cited no actual evidence. It's a completely made up number. The scientific research on e-cigarettes has continued and accelerated. And now there's well over 100 high quality population studies looking at the relationship between e-cigarette use and various diseases in the population. And what those show is that e-cigarette use for some outcomes is indistinguishable from cigarettes, and for others, while it's not as bad as smoking, it's almost as bad. So these people are clinging to conclusions that they drew years ago and ignoring the huge body of evidence which has been published since then. There's now thousands of papers about the health effects of e-cigarettes that have been published. In addition to these big population studies looking at whether or not there's an association with different diseases, there's a lot of studies on the biology of e-cigarettes showing how inhaling e-cigarette aerosol compromises your cardiovascular system, compromises your pulmonary system, stimulates cancer-related genes, and the list goes on and on and on and on. And, you know, it may be that e-cigarettes aren't as bad as smoking, but, you know, they're almost as bad as smoking. And, you know, given how incredibly dangerous smoking is, it's like saying to people, well, you know, rather than jumping out of the 50th story of the building, jump out of the 30th or the 40th story of the building. You know, the consequences are still pretty dire. And the other thing is that e-cigarette use is in every country that I've seen, it's dominantly among kids, most of whom were nicotine naive, hadn't been addicted to nicotine. And there's, no matter how low the risks of e-cigarettes are, they're not zero. And there's nothing good about addicting kids to e-cigarettes. There's already many studies. There have been several what are called meta-analyses published, which is like a quantitative summary of the existing literature, showing that kids who use e-cigarettes have more asthma, they have more respiratory problems, and, you know, they miss more days in school.
Suicidal thoughts, depression.
Yeah. And so, I mean, Brazil has done very well in Visa's regulatory regime of trying to keep them out of the country has worked. And it's like you have a system which has been effective. The senator and the politicians should be praising Visa and increasing its budget so that it can be more aggressive in enforcing the existing regulations, rather than out there carrying the tobacco companies' water, trying to turn Brazil into the United States or England or one of these other countries where e-cigarette use is completely out of control. It's very disappointing that you have political leaders in Brazil who are willing to repeat these lies.
Senator Thronicke said worse than supporting the lobby in the industry lobby was supporting crime. Can we say by that that supporting an industry that kills people, it's not like, oh, my hair got dry, oh no, my skin got wrinkles now, it's death, taking people about 50 years old, like dying and leaving their families on poverty, without money, without their loved ones. During a century, we know that. Can we say that supporting the industry lobby is the same as supporting crime too?
Well, yeah, but you know, this argument, the industry, I mean, this is another routine industry argument that's been used for decades. And that is, if you don't allow them to have free access to the market and sell as much of their products as they can and make as much money as they can, that will increase crime. And that argument has been made against every tobacco control policy I've ever seen. I got involved in this issue here in California in 1978 when there was the first effort to pass a state law restricting smoking in public places. And one of the big themes of the tobacco companies was that if this law passed, which created, it wasn't even smoke-free, it created no smoking areas, that there would be an increase in crime and that police would have to stop arresting murderers and start arresting smokers. And, you know, they defeated the law then, but since then we've had increasingly strong smoke-free laws all over the state and all over the country. That in every single case, the tobacco companies have claimed it would increase crime. We've now had these laws on the books for some of them for 20 or 30 years, and there was no increase in crime. You know, here in San Francisco a couple of years ago, we became the first city in the country to ban the sale of all flavored tobacco products. The tobacco companies ran ads saying that if that law passed, there would be an increase in smuggling, an increase in crime, police would be taken away from arresting murderers to arrest e-cigarette users. It's all the same arguments you're hearing in Brazil. It never happened. You know, the law passed. The police are still, like, you know, doing their usual police thing. The only thing that changed is the sales of flavored tobacco products virtually disappeared in San Francisco. And the level of use of those products, especially among kids, dropped, and the tobacco companies made less money. And, you know, it's very disappointing that you have political leaders in Brazil who are willing to repeat these lies. The tobacco companies are very aggressive in reaching out to politicians. I don't know the details in Brazil, but I can tell you that every politician who's aggressively advocated the industry's positions that's been dug into ended up, if you dug deep enough, you found some kind of connection.
Barra Torres, or our current president for Anvisa, and the one that will judge the new process about the e-cigarette, he was stating that Brazil would gonna have a lot of public pressure and would have to make a point very strong point to convince people otherwise, and no one was talking about it. The report from Anvisa, made out of many researches, qualitative researches, a very mature report that would need to be formally, approved after public consultation, was okay. And now Senator Soraya Thronicke appears every other day in the news, mobilizing population to say that we need to know what's inside the e-cigarette because they come from China. And I made a quick research, and the most sold in the streets here in Rio de Janeiro is Ignite. Ignite is licensed by European Union. It's not from China. They are sold here and they are imported from where they are legalized. Do you want to say something about this?
I'm not an expert on the e-cigarette supply chain, but I can tell you that China makes most of the e-cigarettes sold in the world, even if they're sold by other companies. And, the question of what's in the product, I don't think it's that important, because if you look at the research which has been done on product toxicity, it turns out that there's not that much difference between these different products. A colleague of mine here at the University of California, San Francisco, has studied the effects of e-cigarette aerosol exposure on blood vessels. Your blood vessels are always getting bigger and smaller, minute to minute, second to second, to adjust changes in the need for blood flow and maintain your blood pressure. And that process, which is very important to being healthy, and also if you screw it up, it predicts developing heart disease later. He compared Juul e-cigarettes, which is a fourth generation pod system, with earlier tank systems, with Marlboro cigarettes, with marijuana cigarettes, with nicotine-free cigarettes, with THC-free marijuana cigarettes, with marijuana vaporizers. And you know what? In terms of the effect, the adverse effects on blood vessels, they're all the same. And not that different from things like diesel exhaust and forest fire smoke. And so, the idea that minor differences between different e-cigarettes matter is just probably not true. You're inhaling an aerosol of ultrafine particles. You take propylene glycol and vegetable glycerin, which are fine to eat, but when you heat that up and aerosolize it and inhale it, that has all kinds of disruptive effects on the cells that line your mouth, on your gums, on your airways. Those particles are so small, they get right into your blood vessel, into your blood, into cells, trigger inflammatory processes. And, other things like the flavoring agents, like chocolate, cocoa oil, or cinnamon oil, which are great to eat, but if you aerosolize them and inhale them, they tear up your lungs. And so, I'm sure it's true that the differences in the details of how an e-cigarette is made probably have some effect on its toxicity. But the fact is, the basic design of them, we're inhaling an aerosol of ultrafine particles and nicotine, that is 80 or 90% of the badness. And so why take these dangerous products and introduce them legally into the Brazilian market when Anvisa's been doing a good job under the current regulatory scheme of keeping them out? The only benefit of legalizing them is to increase profits for the multinational tobacco companies.
That's always the point. And let's exercise a scenario, a case scenario. If the electronic cigarettes or heated tobacco gets in every corner legally, do you think it will protect the kids? What do you think it will be the natural history of Brazilian health?
Oh, if Anvisa changes the regulation to allow these products in the country legally, you're just going to see use explode up to the same levels which are observed in other countries which allow them, and with all the associated disease and death. I mean, it's obvious. Again, if you look at the countries where they have prohibited e-cigarette, illegal sale of e-cigarettes, there is a little bit of e-cigarette use because the companies smuggle them in. But it's a tenth or a 20th of what you see in countries that have more laissez-faire policies. And here in the United States, the FDA has theoretically been regulating e-cigarettes for about almost 10 years, and there's no meaningful regulation of these products. There's thousands of illegal products on the market. The FDA tried to prohibit the sale of Juul, which is, that was the one that a hugely innovative product that was much more addictive. And Juul sued them, and FDA backed off. Now, theoretically, FDA is negotiating with Juul, but the fact is they're still out there. You can still buy them legally. They're still selling them all over the place.
Once they're out, they never go back because they have a lot of money.
Yeah, I mean, and so you have currently in Brazil an effective policy. It's protecting public health. Brazil also has very low smoking rates, thanks to the many other tobacco control policies that have been implemented over the years in Brazil. And so
they say it's because of education campaign. Only, not the empower measures.
Well, education is important. It's an important component of this, but the more important component is things like graphic warning labels, taxes, restrictions on where you can use the product. Those are getting smoking out of entertainment media. Those are the things that make a big difference. And again, if you think about the position that the tobacco industry is advocating in Brazil, it's like you have a successful policy which has kept the problem under control in Brazil. Let us come in and start promoting and selling these things all over the place like we do in other countries where they become a huge problem. But tell people not to use them or tell kids not to use them. It just doesn't work. It's much better to not get the disease in the first place than to say, we're going to introduce smallpox into the country and tell people to be careful not to get it. I mean, it's just crazy. And again, you've got to ask the question, why are the tobacco companies pushing for this? They're pushing for it because they want to increase sales.
Yeah, they say because they are not interested in making any harm. They will lower the nicotine levels. They can do that. They can do this, and everything will be okay.
Yeah, well, it's like you're saying, let's have hire a bank robber to protect the banks. I mean, Brazil has a good, effective, strong regulatory environment right now.
Do you listen this? This compliment from other people in the world, because they say they are laughing at us?
That's just not true. The people I know who care about public health are impressed with Brazil. The FDA has over 1,000 employees, and Visa, I don't remember the number, but it's very
low. They work a lot.
And Visa has actually implemented much more effective policies than what we have here in the United States. Brazil is viewed among public health people as a leader.
We have this stray cat complex from colonies, from being colonized. And we always think that they are doing better in other countries than we do
Well,
here.
let's put it this way. If the United States was doing as well as Brazil was in terms of controlling e-cigarettes and other tobacco products, I would be a very happy person. If we were doing, if I could snap my fingers and get all of Brazil's policies implemented here in the United States, we would be so much better off. And it's insane to go to Brazil, which is a world leader on protecting public health from the tobacco industry. And
vaccines and many more. We are very good at public health, thanks to our united health system.
Yeah, and it's just like, why mess with success? I mean, the tobacco industry is spending a lot of money now on, flying these experts in, organizing these campaigns and the PR efforts and the political efforts. And it's just no different than what they've done to oppose clean indoor air laws, to oppose taxes, to oppose warning labels. It's just the standard industry playbook. And it's very important that the policymakers and the people in Brazil resist that, because you're doing a great job right now and you want to keep doing a great job.
And be respected, right? Because we work a lot.
Oh, yeah.
We are not here because of money. We are here because of ethics and public health, because we made a vow. And is it possible that Senator Thronicke may pay attention, because she's making deals with the devil? And I have 3 points here. Maybe because she's too confident in what she's done and the good work she's done, and by her team. Maybe because there's some huge hidden interest behind, which I may be baffled, because I always liked her statements as a senator, as a presidency candidate, and her actions against corruption, her attitude against corruption, maybe not by her, but by her team. And we know that CPI, that is our main investigation about products, about illegal things, where is everyone now? And we don't want any other than the COVID was. It was pretty sad to see how people from the government didn't care about our health, our population health. And third point, she's too naive. She never studied about the industry tactics and don't know all the serious criminal actions against humanity nicotine products did already for a century. What do you think?
Well, I mean, I can't comment on her personally or the specifics of that situation, because I don't know the details. But all I can tell you is that what I'm seeing happen, if you just look at what you can see, it's just the standard tobacco industry playbook that they have used all over the world for decades. That hearing, it's in Portuguese, so I don't speak Portuguese, but from reading the summary that you sent me, it's just the standard industry arguments. And you could take e-cigarettes out and put in graphic warning labels, and it would be the same arguments. And I'll bet you, if you went back in time to when the graphic warning labels were being proposed and debated in Brazil, the exact same arguments were being made by the industry. I would bet you a cup of coffee that you would find exactly the same predictions, exactly the same claims, and that if you then looked at did any of those come true, the answer is no. In a way, the tobacco companies are just not very creative. They just keep using the same arguments over and over and over again. But they're very rich and they're very powerful, and they can work behind the scenes, and all this other stuff is sort of window dressing to try to provide coverage for the politicians to do what they want. And, I don't know the specific details of this senator, but it just, in listening to the story and watching it, it's just the same old, same old. I can point to politicians here in California that behaved exactly the same way and made all the same excuses on other issues.
And their names gets in history as a very sad attitude. That stays forever. So please, Senator Soraya Thronicke, I think you're better than that.